Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I am Ryan Johnson of Tailored Agent, and I am joined today by one of the co-founders of Tailored Agent and a good friend, John Van Horn. Now, we are going to dive into a very interesting story of not only an individual, but a way into the real estate industry that I had never heard of before when we met over 10 years ago. So I'm super excited for today. And John, thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks for having me. I'm actually excited to get into this, and hopefully, there's some people out there that also zigzag their way into real estate. So let's do this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's stories of how people get into the industry are always very unique, whether it's a second career or they kind of just fell into it. I don't think any kid wakes up and just wants to be a realtor one day. But let's just kind of start there. Give us, so we met in 2015. And I know that was kind of your first foray into real estate. I had just relocated to the area with my license. So give me a little bit of backstory of leading up to that. What were you doing? How did it all play out? And yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it concise because it can get lost in the weeds real fast. So when we met in 2015, I was finishing my master's degree for atmospheric science, doing online courses, as well as writing my master's thesis using drone technology for hydrometeorology. So, to break that down, that and working at that high volume team full time. So, my weeks, I lost most of my hair back then during that time. But before I go further on that, let me back up because there's a lot to discuss there. And again, I really would love to relate to someone that has so many backgrounds that got into real estate. So uh, I was always a curious kid growing up, and I wanted my hands in everything. I was very athletic. I was very anxious to, maybe not anxious, but I was very, I guess, curious to do as much as I possibly could. I didn't have family in real estate. I didn't know anyone in real estate. I didn't have some uncle or sister or aunt or anything like that. Zero experience to real estate. At 18 years old, I was a horrible student grown in high school, absolutely horrible. And I went to a college orientation August 2001. In the middle of it, I stood up while people were in it, and I walked out. And I borrowed my car my mom's car that morning. I was going to be first generation, only son, college. It was a big proud moment for her. I picked her up that night from work, and she said, "How was it?" Well, what she didn't know is I left the orientation. And I went to the military recruiting station.
Oh man, every parent's exactly what they want to hear.
August 2001, and I was in DC area. I walked in, I had no clue what I was doing, and I started looking around and like, well, who wants me? Who wants? The only recruiter that was in at this center was the Air Force recruiter, Master Sergeant. He brought me in and he gave me this test, like a sample test, and he was like, here are the top five. The first one was aircraft mechanic. I grew up as a mechanic. I was pulling engines out of cars at 11 years old. So hook, line, and sinker, 18 years old, was like, I absolutely will be an aircraft mechanic. So we scheduled our first official meeting to fill out everything. And that meeting was scheduled for noon on September 11th, 2001.
That's crazy.
So I'll say I joined for 6 years active duty and went through the whole uh, aircraft partying mechanic for 6 years. And 2 of the years I was special duty and I flew with missions as the mechanic on board from '05 to '07. But then I got out, moved to New York City, took care of my nephew, did some mobile mechanic stuff. And this is a bit embarrassing, but I was also a model in New York. Don't don't know if you knew that, Ryan.
I did not know that, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want to ask the follow up questions, but
No, no, we'll move past that pretty fast. I was a mechanic, also a model living in a studio apartment with my sister and nephew. Moved to Atlanta to start college, and that was my whole college entrance is small school outside of Atlanta. Then transferred to Mississippi State University for atmospheric science, where I got big into the veteran community. Also walked on to the football team there at 30 years old, and and getting to where, I guess linking up to where I started the story. I was funded through my master's degree with a drone research grant with hydrometeorology, and that's also a time where I was deciding. I really got big into the drone world, wanted to start my own business. I was on a path. I got hired by the hurricane hunters to fly through hurricanes as a flight meteorologist. That hit a snag when I was in processing back into the Air Force. So I decided to start a business in the drone world. However, I had zero business experience, hence real estate. So in my 30-year-old mind, I figured, well, let's jump onto this high volume team, sink or swim scenario, learn as much client relations, business, lead gen, all that stuff that's going to catapult me into owning a drone business. And that's how I ended up getting into real estate.
that is there's a lot to unpack there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So I think one of the interesting things, and before we go any further, obviously, thank you for any your time in the service, and that is something that is so valuable across the country. And oddly enough, it's a skill and a background that we hear very often. Now, kind of falling into the real estate side and the military side, would you say you kind of always been impulsive, or were those more strategic decisions on your end of that had a little bit more behind them?
Ryan, this podcast is all about being real. I was impulsive as hell. And in a way, I was impulsive with a sense of strategy, method to my madness, but that strategy always got punched in the face the second I actually got into that impulsive decision.
Was there anything that you feel like, especially being a mechanic? I mean,
Yeah.
that there's a lot of thought that goes into that. You need to know all the different components and how to put things together. And then the military side, they're very structured. Do you think that kind of set the stage to make real estate easier, or did you still find kind of real estate was, you were thrown into the deep end?
It's a really good question. And honestly, there are quite a few veterans that have become real estate agents. And to be quite honest, the military is really good at preparing you for the chaos, preparing you to set you out on a mission where the plan is the plan, but you already know it's never going to go to plan. So you already know when there was a time I don't think I'm sharing too much here, but there was a time where we were flying into Baghdad, and I believe the pilot accidentally flew like 30, 45 minutes past his waypoint and we always did combat, entries and exits. And I remember hearing that and being like, well, the plan has gone to hell. Let's just execute. Let's do it. So there's so many veterans in the real estate space that could link something called the commander's intent is basically your North Star. What are you going after? And then when the plan gets all screwed up, such as real estate transactions, it really shows the preparation of military to be able to step up and do whatever is possible to get to the closing table and serve your client the best.
No, that's super interesting because it's, obviously the comparison is there as far as real estate. You're always putting out fires. In the military, totally different animal. They're not really comparable at whatsoever because people's lives are at risk.
Yeah.
Um, on the real estate side, I feel agents make a big deal over just like how stressful everything can be. And it feels like you're just being pulled in a million directions. Would you say that first year, did it feel like that? Or were you kind of prepared just based on what you had gone through that it was easier to tackle?
I got my ass handed to me. The first, I took one of those accelerated license courses through the state of Georgia. So I went from August of July 2015, deciding not to go the hurricane hunter route, going this real estate route through a mutual friend we have. And then August, I think it was a 10-day course where I was licensed after I took my test after a 10-day accelerated course. And then I was onboarded to this high volume team. And by October, no, excuse me, around October, November was when I started going on listing appointments. So I was exclusively a listing agent from the start. So I was fed a bunch of leads, and let's get into it. I went 0 for 20. We
It's pretty
talked
good.
about this, Ryan. I went 0 for 20 in my first 20 listing appointments. And I remember my supervisor, he brought me into a room and I was like, well, this is the day they fire me. Like I gave it my best. 0 for 20 is pretty bad. So I, uh, I was ready for him to fire me, and I jumped ahead and I said, I know this isn't for me. Like this just, I obviously have not performed, gone through 20 leads, gotten, 20 appointments, gotten nothing. And he looked at me, he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, we're not worried about you at all. Like you're going to be fine. You're going to find your niche. And I remember leaving that meeting like, what the hell just happened? I thought I was going to get fired, and he's telling me I'm doing great. So there was a lot of self-doubt, a lot of stress, picking up that phone, looking at the phone number that first time, and you dial it and you hear the ringtone and all that, like anticipation is like, all right, don't screw this one up, John. And you have no clue who you're going to get. You're going to get someone that may cuss you out and hang up on you, or you may get someone that's like, I'm so glad you called.
Yeah,
And I learned that from the mind plays a lot of tricks on you going into those early years reach outs.
absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely something to kind of wrap your head around of all of a sudden you're talking to strangers and you're in their homes. And
Yeah.
how did so you said you were mainly on the listing side, and obviously that means you're putting the house up for sale, you're marketing it and trying to encourage a buyer to get there.
Yeah.
Do you feel that was the right space for you, or how did you kind of go from, hey, I'm applying to this company and all of a sudden I'm on the listing side?
Yeah. So the listing side, according to that company, was more transactional. It was
Okay.
more, they weren't looking for people to become, for people to become friends of their clients. They were looking for them to tell them the truth. So if they want to list their house at $300,000 and their house really shouldn't hit the market above 225, they need someone that's not just going to buy listings and waste people's time. So I ended up on the listing side. It was the right move for me. However, I do want to mention two things. They did have us take those typical personality tests, the DISC, Myers-Briggs, all that stuff. And then based on those results, they threw us in the thing. Well, they had us take it during hiring.
Okay.
So I'll be honest, I answered the questions based on getting the job and where I wanted them to put me. So I knew that they wanted a more transactional person for listing. So I answered for that. So that's number one. Number two is that once I did find my niche, I became one of the top converting agents in the company. So going from 0 for 20 to in the top three, that's a hell of a change. And I guess the follow up question, I'll ask it for you, is what changed? Well, when I found my niche and got my style and actually settled into to me, to who I am, then I came across way more confident. I came across more relatable to them because I had so many backgrounds. It was very, very hard to not find parallels with a lot
Right.
of people between military, college football, science, living all over the country. Like there was something that I could find that related to them, and I just became me.
Is that something that you feel doing that test on the front end and kind of knowing what people want to hear? Because it's the same thing if you go to any corporation, you can plug and play the right words on a resume or you can play into the job description. Do you think that kind of helped or hurt the company get people where they need to be? Because and we are talking about a high turnover industry, and you kind
Yep.
of have to wonder if a lot of that just has to do with misplacement.
Well, so no, great question and great point because the high turnover I think is directly related to how you're going to approach your business starting out in real estate. So if you're at month one, month two, year one, uh, depending on your volume, depending on whatever your approach you're taking, you have to fail.
Mhm.
That's gonna it has to happen. You're gonna get cussed out. You're gonna get kicked out of homes. I can't tell you. I mean, there's plenty of stories that we can go into that we'll all be laughing and crying at the same time. And realtors listening to this will be like, "Yep, I got you." Um, so you have to go through that stuff. And for me, that test that they gave me, the typical personality test you get, honestly, it was just an obstacle to get on the team. It was interesting, the results for about a week. After that, I went back, like, it didn't change anything I did.
And it
Uh,
didn't tell you stuff about yourself that you didn't know.
no, no, especially narrowed and focused into real estate. It just was like, okay, check. What's
Yep.
next?
So starting out, obviously, there's some things that are just terrifying for people: cold calling, door knocking, and talking to strangers, pitching things you don't fully believe in. But you had mentioned that you were a walk-on for a football team at 30. So you don't do that without some level of confidence or self-assurance somewhere. Is that, kind of before real estate, have you been self-confident in general, or do you kind of just try to find situations that you can relate to?
So having so many backgrounds, what I've learned is that you don't really understand that world unless you experience it. You're in it. So, a good example is all the people that aren't in real estate. They will tell you uh, what they think of realtors, and you're like, well, okay, great. Like you have no clue. Same thing for football. Same thing for anything else I've done. The one thing about football was that I grew up playing football. I grew up as a very athletic person. Ended up joining the military. So when I ended up making the decision to train for football, I was completely out of shape, and I just did what I knew best, which was move the body, narrow the technique, and just don't stop. Be persistent as hell. I was training. Hell, you can say it's 7 days a week, but one or two of those days was recovery, active recovery days. So getting, getting the body right, getting the mind right for a high pressure situation, whether it is football, whether it is a big real estate deal or anything like that starting out, you really, for me, my strength was leaning into myself and just saying, great, I'm here with my strength. With leaning into myself, training and narrowing it, I can get up to here and here.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. So you had you grew up playing football, which made that a little bit easier and confident transition. On the real estate side, because it's a brand new industry, how do you wake up every morning and still get that same level of confidence, especially that self assuredness when you're going, 0 for 1, 0 for 2, 0 for 20? Like, what other than that conversation where the higher up said, you're still doing a great job. It's like in that 0 to 20, what keeps you going? How do you prepare to kind of go back the next day?
I'll be honest, without that supervisor having that meeting and telling me I'm on the right track, if I didn't have a supervisor and I was just part of a team, I probably would have been like, well, this just isn't for me. So I'm really lucky to have that 10-minute meeting,
Mhm.
whatever, 15, whatever it was, that one-on-one. So I'm really lucky to have that. And I guess if I had to go back and say, what if you didn't have that and you continued, what would it have taken? It would have been, honestly, we read a lot of books, a lot of business books as real estate agents. It would have been something along the lines of grit,
Mhm.
where you, if you're in that situation where nothing's working, the only way out is forward. I mean, if you're in that tunnel, if you're, what are you going to turn around and go back? If you turn around and quit and you think you're at square one, then you're fooling yourself. You're never at square one. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you failed for 4 months straight. If you find yourself at the same position, no leads, no sales, you have 4 months of experience under your belt. Like that is the time to go back in, learn what makes you you, and pivot into an approach that works. That's really the best way forward in business in general, especially real estate.
So yeah, obviously, grit is super important. It's something that's a great trait for anyone in sales or real estate to have. But having started on a high performing team where they do kind of set your leads for you, it is a little bit more of a warmer lead, and you're kind of just there to close it. Do you think you would have had a different approach if you just got your license and tried to sell on your own, or do you think you would have been able to overcome that hurdle without the team aspect?
I definitely would have still went 0 for 20. But no, that is that's a point of real estate, especially starting out, that I took for granted. That yes, we were fed leads through inside sales agents, and um, starting out, I think it's, you got it. You really, if I had to go back, I would really have to look at myself in the mirror every morning and say, how am I going to present myself to this market? Am I a analytical person where I'm going to send out a bunch of graphs and partner with people to keep people informed about the market on the data side? Am I going to be a relationship builder and build as many partnerships as I can and host events? And like that's the stuff that I would have to do different. As seriously, like literally look at myself in the mirror every day and say, what is it that I'm going to accomplish today? What's the main goal? What's the commander's intent? And what is the plan? And I would have to do that over and over and over. So, yes, I was totally spoiled with the leads, but I would like to point out that 0 for 20 leads, that wasn't my problem. Where I
Sure.
think a lot of real estate agents think, well, if I just had more leads, then I would sell more. Well, I guess in a way, yes, you need leads to sell more, but I had 20 and I went 0 for 20 and then became a top converting agent. So leads are great, but it's not the full equation to getting up and going, especially in the beginning of your career.
So yeah, I think that's super important when it comes to real estate. Obviously, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg. Do I need the leads first? How do I get off the ground? Do I join a team? Am I going out on my own? And especially for us, like we came to Georgia without anyone, and that's where it becomes hard to really tackle real estate in a meaningful way. Of like, I'm going to be an individual agent. I'm going to go cultivate my own business, and it can be helpful to get on a team, but it becomes, what point do you then spread your wings? So
Yeah.
if you were going to take a look at that team route, obviously you kind of went in a different direction after a period of time. Like, what is it that would have made you feel confident to go from the leads being provided on the team to, I'm ready to do this on my own and go have my own business?
Yeah, again, and honestly, that's what I did with the drone business. Rewinding back, like the whole point I joined real estate is to get business experience to then start another business that was completely different industry. But going back to your question, going from that team environment to me being the only team member and founder of my real estate business, I would really have to understand like what am I focusing on? If it's residential, then okay, great. Am I more of a buyer's agent? Am I a listing agent? Do I want to deal with sellers? Am I both? Because if you do the whole spray and pray and going wide really fast, I think that's a lot of what agents do is that they say, I'll do anything. I'll sell in town. I'll sell 2 hours out of town. I'll sell vacant land. I'll sell everything, every asset class. So if I had to go back, I would really understand like what strengths make me me, and then try to overlay that asset class, overlay the model in my business, my buyer or listing. Am I both? Am I going to do new home sales? Am I going to specialize in older fixer uppers? Am I going to be an investor type thing? So there's so many different avenues that you can go, but it really depends on you. It depends on what am I going to be comfortable with? What am I weak at? Do I find a pathway to growth in that weakness? And if I feel like I'm super weak at something, but I don't really know how I'm going to jump into that. Like if I was an individual agent and I said, you know what, I'm going to be a commercial real estate agent, no team, no anything. And that's a weakness I have. Would it make sense to be an individual commercial real estate agent starting out? For me, hell no, that wouldn't have
Sure.
worked. However, as we'll see on these test results um, coming up, that it was fascinating to see all the subsections and the section of saying that I was an extra. I guess we'll go into it, but that I'm more outgoing.
Sure.
Well, where am I outgoing? And that's what I'm getting at is like, am I outgoing in the sense that I'm going to go to a mingling 200-person party and come out with leads? No, that's not me. What I will do is I will host some type of crazy physical exercise event with a bunch of strangers and come out with like family like friends because we just did something really hard. And I would love to lead that. So I guess what I'm getting at is that finding the strengths, the interests, aligning that with your weakness and saying, you know what, I have a path of least resistance to make this weakness strength. And that's how I would build my business in real estate.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great approach. And it's honestly the foundation for building a personal brand. And I think that's where, you and I have talked about this a lot of times, where the landscape for real estate's changing.
Yeah.
Agents used to really focus on hanging a license with a brokerage and relying on that brokerage to be their outward facing persona. But now, especially in the digital and the social media era, the agents have to embrace that branding and really showcase who they are as an individual to get that client base built, whether it's your interest, finding out what you're comfortable with, and just finding like-minded people similar to exactly what you're saying. I think that's a perfect segue for us to be able to just kind of like touch on your tailored agent report. And for those that haven't taken it yet, this is really just an overview of your personality strengths, your real estate strategy, and your habits to give you a more personalized view on who you are as if you're building that brand.
And Ryan, before we jump in, let me just put a conclusion to that before we get into the
Sure.
results. What am I doing right now? So 2015, that was high volume stuff. Right now, I am focusing on developments. I'm focusing on investments. So I'm working on a pretty big development project in Colorado Springs right now. the realtor. And if I had to start out and say I'm just going to be a developer friendly realtor, I probably wouldn't have ended up where I am right now. And I'm extremely lucky to have learned what I'm strong at, what I'm skillful at, and then apply it to a niche real estate business market.
Absolutely. If I woke up and got my license and wanted to be a new developer agent, I wouldn't even know where to start. That I'd be like, what's that?
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. So we're gonna dig through the assessment you've taken a little bit, and I just want to get a little bit of your feel if you think, based on obviously having taken the Myers-Briggs and other personality reports, that you're trying to choose an answer that fits somebody else's agenda. Obviously, this is completely unbiased. You're just taking a look internally and saying, hey, this is who I am. And knowing that can help me build a better base for my business. So, one of the things that really came out, especially for a one of the things that came out, especially for a real estate strategy, was that you're actually a relationship builder. Would you think that over a competitive closer or being analytical or a problem solver or a connector, like what is it that you think maybe pulled out that relationship builder side?
I love deep conversations. Um, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And I've had multiple conversations and appointments with clients or customers at the time that they share something that's beyond the surface. It's like, how are you? Where are you from? How many years in the industry? Like all the things that, they Google the top 10 questions to ask your realtor. But, I really wait for them to say something personal because that's where I feel value. I feel value in connecting with people at a very deep level. And I mean, I've shared tears with customers. I've shared tears with customers that said, I'm was diagnosed with cancer and I have a year left to live, and I just want to get this house sold so my kids don't have to do like stuff like that. And having a mom that passed away from cancer, things like that. I was able to connect, and honestly, at that point, forget about the sale,
Mm,
forget about trying to convert, because um, when it comes to that relationship builder, they may not choose me as an agent, but I sure as hell have a friend now. And not that I'm going in trying to get friends, but that relationship building part of it, uh, it soothes my soul, and it can also, again, not the point, but it can also fuel the business. And really, the personality strength, it's about what gives you energy.
mm,
So if I show up as a real estate or a realtor and I have low energy because I'm just drained, I'm I've been in a corner with not talking to anyone and not listen, for hours. I'm going to come out so drained. I'm going to come out like, oh my gosh, now I got
yeah.
to talk to someone. And if I approach those things with an off energy, I'm going to come off as genuine, exhausted, not interested. It's just not going to be a good service to the client. So I really love the relationship builder, and also even with the real estate strategy side, because that's where that pops up. There is tactics there for your business, with those outcomes.
That's awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, I think when it comes to the 5 outcomes on the strategy side,
Yeah,
it becomes a little difficult because you're finding something that gives you energy, but they're also all things that can be used to manipulate the other side to close a transaction. And I
yeah,
think that's where the general public maybe misses the mark a little bit. Obviously, as a relationship builder, if you're having these conversations with clients and they're deep, meaningful conversations, sometimes on the other end, it's, you know, is this person really sincere in what they're saying? They're in my house to sell my home. Are they just trying to get the deal done here? or are these actual meaningful tears where there's compassion and something behind it? So, is there anything that you feel a relationship builder or someone in that situation can do to kind of differentiate the actual trueness of your intentions from someone that's really just trying to get that deal over the finish line?
Yeah. So going in and being true to yourself as a relationship builder and getting to those deep conversations and wanting to have that. If I waited for those tears to come and then switched into hard closer or anything else, it's just ungenuine and they're going to find out. And it's so easy for customers and clients. For one, those barriers are up the second they get attached to you, even if they reach out to you. Barriers are up. If you lower those barriers and then you go in for the kill, then those barriers are going to go out and be like, okay, you're a sleazebag. Really, what works for me being a relationship builder strategy is that I truly care what they talk about. I truly care how they feel about their house. Where did they get their house? Um, are they going to are they trying to buy somewhere else? Are they selling it because they can't afford, all the different things, reasons why they're selling it. I find value and just active listening and caring, really, really caring. There's been times clients are like, I want to do this, or I'm not doing this, I'm doing that. And I politely say, look, I respect your decision. I really want the best for you as a customer client. I mean, this is a big decision. I might not be the right agent for you. And that's okay. Like it sounds counterintuitive, especially people starting out, like sell, sell, sell. But there may be a time where you're not a good agent or good agent for them or their situation, and they may not even be ready to sell. So being a good relationship builder, what if they had a good experience with you, an hour conversation, and then, their cousin needs to sell, or, their neighbor, their son, their whatever. And uh, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that genuinely being the person you are is so valuable. And if you are in a relationship builder, build those relationships. If you're a problem solver, show them your value as of solving problems and how you can do it better than anyone else. But it has to be genuine. And that's honestly what our test shows is what are you genuinely?
Absolutely. I think something a lot of people miss over time is the fact that, there's good and bad agents. There's successful ones, not successful ones, but somewhere in that spread of good, bad, success are good and bad people as well. And I think that's something where, you and I have both encountered over the years, there's plenty of agents that do a lot of business that aren't maybe, they don't have the same ethical code or compass as some of the others, and finding any agent in general where not only they care, but when their back is up against the wall in a stressful part of the transaction,
Yeah.
they show their true colors. So I know you have some of these stories. So if you just want to kind of share something of, give me a time when it was not going well in the transaction, but you did the right thing as a person to either help that client out, get them to the closing table. And, there is a level at which the things we do go above earning a commission. And
Yeah.
some things just aren't always what's required, it's just what happens.
Yeah, episode one, you mentioned cleaning out a house at 3 a.m. with, just complete because the seller wasn't going to remove their stuff the night before closing. I've definitely had those scenarios. So I won't use that exact same one, but there was an FHA deal that I won't go into the 203K loan one. That was fun. Uh, this particular one, this person seller inherited the home from their parents, We went under contract relatively fast. It was in one of those hot markets. Sign in the yard, you're getting a call that night. Went under contract, best contract we can find, full price offer, bunch of FHA offers, like 6 or 7 offers. We went FHA, um, full price, and we had one of the FHA inspection, and of course the basement having a concrete floor was a no go. That was the early in my career when I learned that that is not a good thing for FHA. So again, you're going to learn along the way. So what happened was she got a quote for getting a floor installed, and we were going to have to push the closing because the contractors were too delayed. And I really wanted this to close because she couldn't afford this house. She couldn't afford the anything, utilities, taxes. Certainly couldn't afford to put the flooring down. So, for those that are not familiar, whenever there's a FHA requirement, you can't just throw money at it and close. You actually have to get the work done. So, with all my backgrounds, I called her up one day and I was like, let's just suck it up, step out. And I don't recommend this for anyone because I think there's a lot of liability in this. But I wanted to get it. I wanted to serve my client. I wanted to get it to closing. And I honestly, I felt bad for her because she's like, I literally can't afford to close on this contract. Like, so I helped her order flooring. I went and measured the floor. I was on the like I went up to the store with her. I think it was like a lumber liquidator, one of those. Ordered the floor, picked it up myself, delivered it, and installed it. So I brought all my tools. It was a Saturday. She was like, "Oh my gosh, how can I repay you?" I was like, "Just give me pizza at this point. Like, let's do this together." So I installed her flooring in her basement. I believe it might have been a week before closing, like the weekend before closing. I put in a few. It was like 2 12-hour days to order the stuff, pick it up, cut it all, fit it well. It was a type of actually, no, that's wrong. I had to get it a week before I installed it because I had to acclimate. So I had to do all the stuff properly. And basically, I installed her flooring. The FHA person came back out, passed the inspection, and we closed on time.
And how much would you say this house was?
Um, whew, I don't remember the number. I'll just give you a range. It was one of those.
Under 500,000, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it was under 500. It was one of those like basic 3.2s
Yep.
that had a concrete floor in the basement.
So this is what I think a lot of people don't understand about real estate. The glitz and glam of what you see on TV is so far from the day to day for the majority of the country, and especially under $500,000, which is still a ton of money. We're talking about first time homebuyers, first time sellers. Every dollar matters to these people.
Yeah,
And what you're talking about, I mean, the story is so absurd, not only because like you wouldn't know it, the liability standpoint alone, and you just kind of learn those things along the way. But
yeah,
when you actually go back and from an outsider looking in, knowing what the home was worth, knowing what your commission split was off of the team structure for that, you not only did not make a lot of money when you factor like, I mean, it's just you're there. It's one thing to lose money handling a transaction because all of the time that goes into get something closed. But when you're adding personal time on top of it and those type of things to just help somebody else in need, that is just so ridiculously hard to find in any industry, let alone real estate. And I think that's just, you know, I would love to say we need more of that, but at the same time, it's a fine line between being an advisor and then like really crossing and helping somebody on a personal level.
Yeah, and I really want to say, especially about that scenario, is I never did that again. And the reason why I never did that again is because I learned as a real estate agent to prevent those situations.
Sure.
That is not a scalable model. It
Yep.
is not something I even considered to be a possibility moving forward. So I'm not suggesting people go out and install floors and toilets and stuff like that. But there may be a time in your career that you're going over to your client's house to cut the grass because they're going to get fined and they're out of town. I've
For
had
sure.
that happen. And all of those data points, those experiences, you have to understand, how did I feel about doing that? Well, trust me, I was not comfortable. I didn't really feel that great about installing the floor. I felt great about overall big picture of getting her to the closing table. So what I learned from that is that FHA, concrete floors, write a list, learn all that stuff. So it is a mechanism to become more valuable as an agent to your client and to your own business, because you can't go around being a handyman
Yeah.
and also selling real estate. It's not going to work. It actually shouldn't work.
Yeah, and I think especially as a relationship builder, that is one of the outcomes that really gives an opportunity for your character to shine, because you're connecting with people on a totally different level. Um, Now, being a relationship builder and someone that does enjoy engaging in conversations, your report also came out with an extrovert ambivert, which does mean that you do skew a little bit more to the talkative side, or at least outgoing nature, but you do have that ability to kind of reel it in when needed. Is that something that you find pretty useful, or do you still need your time to kind of recharge and regress as well?
I 100% need to recharge. 100% can't be on all the time. I guess some that identify as extroverts need to be the life of the party. I've definitely been the life of the party. I've also been the quiet person in the corner observing. So I think that shines through in the ambivert side of, like, I can go either way. But generally, I guess paired with that relationship building, I'm rarely going to go into a call or an appointment or anything, um, just doing the bare minimum with communication, and that's
Mhm.
verbal and nonverbal. So that's a big thing with extrovert. You hear extrovert and you think of the agent that will not stop talking at the closing table. We all have gone through those closings where everyone, including the attorney, is like, I'm so glad they're gone.
Yeah.
uh, and that's not me. I'm an extrovert in a way that I want to get things done, and I want to share relatable stories to ensure that my clients know that they're not the only ones that are dealing with this crap. They're not the only ones that are going to be sitting at the closing table reaching for the tissues because this was an emotional close for them.
Mhm.
Or they come in and say, how can we get this done fast as possible? I've had the craziest closings in the world. I've had full on blowouts, separated people into rooms, and through those scenarios, being an extrovert with extroverted nonverbal uh, communications and nonverbal client relations, that may look like, you know, let's not say much, but let's act in a way that I'm going to stand up, request that me and my client go to another room so that they can have a much more smooth, better experience. That's uh, that I would argue is quite extroverted, of
Mhm.
like that action part. Now, it doesn't mean that introverts can't do that too, but it may look a certain way. It may be like the agent is asking the attorney to step outside so they can talk in private. Either way, I really lean on those extroverted moments, not just to be loud and noisy and have the last word or whatever. It's more like that's where I get my energy from.
Sure. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be something that just because you're extrovert, you love going and talking to 5,000 people at a conference. I think you've done a good job as your real estate and personal career has evolved of finding the commonalities in things that you like tapping into the veteran side, YPO. So you're still out there networking and going to these events, but it's something that you're also tying in that's a little bit more comfortable to you, and there's a familiarity to it as well.
Yeah, and all those different networks. My wife's in YPO. I'm in the veteran community. Pat Tillman Foundation. I'm pretty heavily involved. I'm one of the Tillman scholars. Uh, they all have different flows, and like talking about extrovert, true ambivert, introvert, all that stuff. Is that again? You go into a room of 200 people. It depends on who those people are. Are they
Sure.
realtors? Are they, veterans? Are they special operation veterans? Are they, uh, the tippy top of business success executives? Like they all have a different energy.
Yeah.
So that ambivert side really, really helps uh, maintain who you are, but also be a little bit flexible when it comes to those experiences.
Well, I'm glad you said flexible because that will tie us into our final portion of the evaluation. That is your tactical habit. And your main habit type came up as flexible. So, where do you think that kind of comes from? Because you come from even a sports and military background, those are very structured with probably, one would assume, less flexibility built into them.
Well, you would think, and I would agree and disagree. I think it really depends when you get down, and that goes to what I was saying that you don't really know a lifestyle until you're actually in that lifestyle. And with military, there's been a lot of structure, yes, but there's been missions where if I didn't think outside of the box, the mission would have canceled or failed or whatever. And one of them is I'll just share that we landed in Baghdad. A major part of the plane broke where it shouldn't have moved for probably until we called it MRT, Mission Recovery Team, would have flown in, even though I was the only mechanic. They would have flown in to save me, and that is a bad hit record on you as
Uh-huh.
a flying crew chief. At least back then, I don't know how it is now, but you don't want an MRT because everyone else is going to talk. So, as a special duty assignment flying crew chief, I had to think on my feet and say, okay, outside of the box, there's no structure to this. I went into Saddam Hussein's Hussein's private terminal to call Lockheed engineers to get it approved of this thing that I was going to do that was going to at least get us out of Baghdad.
Yep.
And and that's at like 3 in the morning. I remember calling the guy, the engineer, and he's like, "I'm sorry, who is this?" And I'm like, "I'm in Baghdad. This is what we're gonna do." And he's like, "What do you need from me?" I'm like, "Just say you approve it." And he's like, "Oh, okay, I approve it." I'm like, "Sweet." So I run back out to the jet, and that is 100% unstructured, out of the box. If it went wrong, I would have been in deep hell. Like I would have been in I would
Yeah.
have lost my special duty assignment likely. Um, so, and the same thing with football. I walked on. I trained as a kicker. I made the team as a punter, and was moved to wide receiver halfway through my senior year. So
Mhm.
there was a lot of structure, but within that structure, you can find ways to be creative in yourself. And honestly, that's how you perform the best.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think even just looking at your evaluation, if going through, okay, now that I know I'm an extrovert, ambivert, relationship builder, I'm flexible, would you feel confident if you were starting real estate again that you have a little bit better idea of how to get off the ground? Maybe you wouldn't have gone 0 for 20, you might have gone, 1 for 10 or even better.
Yeah, one for 10, I would have been through the roof. Um, it's I'm going to give a loaded answer because Ryan, you and I are founders of this, but we created this company, this product, because we didn't have that. Like you shared your story on episode 1, I'm sharing mine here of really really tough beginnings. And if I had to go back and there was a tailored agent type evaluation that I could take, and it would give me main section outcomes, subsection outcomes, and then guidance on each of those subsections, like leadership, client relations, negotiations, all that stuff. That would have been extremely valuable for me if I go back in 2015, 0 for 20. I guarantee if it was like 0 for 5, I would have been taking this test. If I
Yeah.
came across it, I'd be like, okay, I thought I could do it. 0 for 5, 0 for 10. I need this test. So it would have really helped me understand where my strengths are as a real estate agent and as a person. Because once you have that energy dialed in where you are fueled by certain actions through energy, and then you can narrow down what strategy, what business type, or what
Right.
operations are you going to do. And then once you have those and you have this action part, great. Now it's time. It is the 1, 2, 3 combination that would have definitely helped me uh, advance faster in my career starting out.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I think the goal is to get people from 0 to 1 as quickly as possible, and definitely understanding a little bit about yourself may help achieve that. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to share or any final thoughts for everyone?
There's a lot, um, but in reality, what we created here was a tool for agents to learn more about themselves, and not in a sense that it's typical personality test, because I didn't really learn much. Like, here's a great analogy: those other typical personality tests. It's like saying, "Where is Atlanta?" And those typical personality tests is like, "Here it is." And really, what I need to know is, where is 1, 2, 3 Main Street in Smyrna, Georgia?
Right.
And that's what this test provides you. It provides you more accuracy, so you have better direction. And honestly, we're here. We look at every test that comes in. We're going to be reaching out to people, and honestly, I'm really excited to see people's results and helping them build their brand from the start.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, if anyone has any questions, obviously we are here as well. This is something that we both found value in and would have loved to have 10 years ago. So, Jonna, thanks for sharing your story today. And I know we're excited to get some more people on the podcast and provide more value to other agents out there.
Yeah, every guest is going to take a test. It's going to take the elite evaluation, and we'll discuss it in every episode.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.